Good afternoon, and let's get right to it. I'll lead off by saying happy almost New Year in Iran. It's Nowruz is coming up in a couple of days.
Have you ever been to Iran for Nowruz,
Not
Andres?
for Nowruz, no, but it's wild.
It's wild. What happens on New Year's in Iran? Do they?
Well, there's this whole, I mean, there's, the thing, as you will have seen in my newsletter, that it starts 2 nights before. People jump over fires. There's a lot of, it's all kind of Zoroastrian. You lay out this table with 7 things that begin with the letter S in Persian. Um, there are very symbolic things like goldfish and various items, mirrors. It's a really big deal.
So this year it's going to it coincides with the conflict, but also it coincides with the end of Ramadan, right? Or that's next week.
It does. And this is one of the interesting things, things coincide for whatever reason, is that it is the end of Ramadan, which of course is a very big religious holiday in Islam. But Nowruz in Iran is a pre-Islamic by over 2,000 years holiday. And that's been one of the tensions in Iran since the Islamic Republic is Islam. It's an Islamic Republic, and then Iranian Persian culture that goes back way before the arrival of Islam. And that's kind of been a tug between the two. And the authorities have never been happy with that pre-Islamic sort of celebration. And already, I mean, it's periodically last year, some of the celebrations turned into anti-regime protests. And that's one of the worries about the regime. For the regime this year is, well, okay, lots been going on. They massacred people like less than 2 months ago. People are upset. There's a war going on. What could the celebration of the New Year in Iran turn into this year? So everybody's watching that. That's a really big deal. And we'll see how that plays out. But there's lots going on. Matt, lead off. What's on your mind?
I'm going to ask you one more question: is whether when you talk to people in Iran now, are people hunkered down during the day as well, or are the streets? Is there a curfew in place? Is it completely empty, or is there an opportunity for them to go out and either celebrate or reconnect over Nowruz?
The thing about hunkering down in much of the region is during Ramadan, people want to hunker down because you basically, you're not consuming anything, you're not, eating, you're not even drinking water and so on. So what tends to happen is that a lot of people want to kind of not go outside anyway and sleep during the day. So that's a key element that is thrown into the mix anyway, is that, in addition to the war, possible bombing.
But things get more active after the iftar. The iftar is where everybody meets together and
Yep.
they break their feast together. And usually there is some kind of, I'm not saying norms after the iftar where you go out and you
Yep.
hang out with your friends. So usually it gets busy after the iftar.
It does get busy, and that's the thing, is that this year they've already made clear, the authorities have made clear that don't go out on the streets and start celebrating anything. And there's one more thing, is that we're in the 40-day mourning period of the killing of the supreme leader of Islam, and he was killed on February 28th, and it's only been about 3 weeks. So everybody's supposed to be grieving. And the authorities have also made clear now is not the time to be celebrating anything. You might be in a festive spirit because it's the new year. Forget it. There's a war, but also we're supposed to be very sad because Ali Khamenei was killed. So it's a very strange week in a very strange time.
Yeah, not only him. I mean, speaking of authorities, it seems like are there what's left of the authorities? I mean, maybe that's a good. I mean, I think this week with Larijani and the head of the Basiji, and then the head of the.
Exactly. This is one of the questions, and I'm glad you brought this up. Who's left, right? I mean, they got the head of intelligence today. So that's one of the things, if we step back for a second, we have to ask ourselves, there's this decapitation strategy, right? And it's kind of been split between the Israelis are going after the people, individuals, we all know high-level people, they've lopped off lots of people in the leadership. And then the Americans have been going after strategic sites that might be aiding in the war effort. But you got to ask yourself, they've lopped off all these people and the regime continues. So what's the message, right? So now we have the son of the slain supreme leader, who is in theory the new supreme leader. Nobody's seen or heard from him, actually in a very long time, even before his appointment. But some people are saying, well, actually, the fact that the regime can continue to function without apparently somebody, a supreme leader acting and speaking and so on, kind of means that there are some people behind the throne, as it were, who are keeping the system going, that the intelligence, IRGC, are so deeply ingrained that they can actually keep the system going without a dude at the top.
I want to go back to what Matt said about people on the streets. Actually, what happened yesterday, Matt, that the hit on the gas facilities in Asouliye, I don't take this lightly, because the infrastructure inside Iran, the gas, it's built in. So when you stop all this and you break it, that means the people, you're gonna break down the rhythm of their daily life for the ordinary Iranian. This means longer blackouts, less heat, more disruption, and even the hospitals will be impacted. Is this a call for an uprising in Iran? I don't know. And the part of that is the south part that was hit is the same shared reservoir as Qatar northern field. So
Yep.
damage on the Iranian side does not stay neatly inside Iran borders. It's even the direct strikes on Tehran infrastructure goes back to the impact to Doha. This is another pressure to do some kind of an uprising. I don't know. What do you think about that, Andres?
It's big. And, it's the first time significantly that gas facilities have been hit. We always talk about oil. That's clearly a big thing on the international market. But so is natural gas. This could be, in many sea changes we've had thus far, yet another sea change in this conflict is going after gas. As you said, it doesn't affect just Iran. It does add to another level of discomfort. Something has to give, right? I mean, you're taking out the people, you're smashing into these infrastructural, elements in the country. It's this constant pounding. I should add, by the way, that the Israeli defense minister today said that all Iranian leadership is fair game now. Apparently, there was some consultation and discussion about whom to hit and so on. As of today, it's basically fair game and open season on anybody at the upper levels of Iran. So, some people don't want to show up for work because they might be hit. If you work for the security agency, you don't want to go in knowing, well, they're going to hit my building today. So talk about staying at home.
But I'm not sure if Iran's response to the attacks so far reflects, good coordination, or even suggests that there's a clear, kind of chain of command, that when you get number one, number two, number three slot in. And I believe there are probably some alternative scenarios that at least seem plausible until we know for sure. One is that the response was put in place before this all started. If this happens, we're going to devolve power. We'll give, units in the 31 provinces. Others have autonomy to act. The other explanation is a little bit more simple. Like, this is a sign of desperation by an increasingly kind of incapacitated regime in Tehran, that it doesn't feel, hitting the Gulf states, hitting the Saudis. They're effectively made the entire region their enemy. And if you're thinking about long-term regime survival, it's not clear how that really fits into some coherent strategy for them. So, I mean, I think, we were surprised by, they're doing a lot more than we thought. But this is also kind of, it's unified the Gulf states. So we know they're fighting with each other, but it's not really leading to necessarily a clear outcome besides chaos. And chaos is the thing you worry about. Again, you decapitated Saddam and the regime, but you didn't figure out who's going to replace them. You let the Ba'athists sort of reorganize as a guerrilla force. That would be the cautionary tale for Iran. But I'm not sure this really means that the regime is kind of holding on strongly based on this.
Well, there are a lot of unintended consequences. You think about Russia attacking Ukraine, and then suddenly, or it took a bit of time, but what's the end? One of the end results is that Finland and Sweden are now in NATO, which they weren't before. So you're right, Matt. I mean, this could really unify in a Gulf that hasn't always been unified in how they approach Iran. Well, now they have a common enemy that's come after them. So there are a lot of unintended consequences, and we're going to just have to see how this plays out.
Yeah, I wonder, under sort of on sort of Larijani, how significant is his decapitation? Because suddenly, since he was killed on Tuesday, or we heard that he was killed on Tuesday, we were told that he was the one who was leading the country
Yes.
in reality, and wasn't just the sort of Khamenei's face to the world, but was the man pulling the strings internally in Iran.
Well, it's a good point, Matt. And he was significant, not just because it's understood that he basically kept the system going
Right.
since the war began, but there are a lot of people who would argue that he was somebody who could straddle the different points of view. You know, he's closely tied to the conservative elements in a very conservative leadership already. And at the same time, he was viewed as a pragmatist, as somebody, if there's, a known person, he has spoken to the West, he was involved with the JCPOA negotiations. Some people viewed him as being too soft, even, and that held his career back. He was in the middle and was understood to be somebody who could perhaps have brokered some type of kind of bringing down the conflict. And now that's gone. So he probably was big. I mean, from what we understand, he just a system insider, a name keeping things going. And yeah, now he's gone. And it's and as you said, we have these autonomous units that are in theory following orders that predate the war. So you have people who are just basically now, automatons sort of marching according to pre-issued pre-war instructions.
Yeah.
That they also can adapt to the circumstances changing.
I sort of wonder whether the Israeli and the American strategy here is fully aligned, or are they actually looking to accomplish different outcomes? I mean, Israel is committed quite openly to regime change. I think you've seen President Trump some days say that he wants this, some days, I mean, again, the day before this all started, we assumed that the most likely outcome would be some kind of agreement with some milder version of the IRGC. That was the best case scenario for the U.S. But it seems like facts have definitely changed on the ground, and these killings and the success is really has done that.
I'll tell you what I looked at was, once they killed Ali Khamenei, then the question became, in my mind, was the issue him, or is it that particular job of supreme leader? Because arguably, the guy was there for 37 years. He wasn't a big fan of the West. He did ultimately, kind of all power was vested in his hands. Some may have slipped away in the past couple of years, but he was the literally supreme leader. Everybody had issues with him in the West. So you could have argued that, okay, if he personally was the issue, it's not the title of supreme leader, but there could be somebody else we work with. But what Israel made very clear quite quickly was that it doesn't matter who replaces him. The replacement also has a target on their back. And to me, that is an interesting thing to look at, that it's not the people who were the problem. It's the very kind of foundation of the Islamic Republic. That means that anybody ultimately who is the supreme leader is going to be have a target on their back.
I would say also that what maybe the US wants out of this war is different than what Israeli wants out of this war. Israeli for sure wants to have the Islamic Republic gone. And throughout the years, they are no longer talking about having some kind of a peace process. It's about elimination, taking care of it, changing the regime. And it goes the same for Lebanon. Just trying to do the comparison, because I come from Lebanon. Before it was they want to contain and try to stay safe. Now the game has changed. They want to eliminate any threat that can come to Israel. So I don't see that the US and Israel have the same end goal out of this war.
Yeah. Speaking of sort of, the other thing that Israel is doing, obviously, is, I wouldn't call it mopping up, but also addressing the other problems that it sees as a danger to them, and they're moving into southern Lebanon. Leila, I know that's where your family's from, and that's the country you're from, but I can see from Bibi's point of view, okay, I've been committed to this for 40 years. I've been talking about Iran obsessively for 40 years. I've been obsessed with the rest of Israel. I got to do Iran. In Lebanon, the government, we wish, Nawaf Salam, the prime minister there, all the best, but they're not able to disarm Hezbollah. Hezbollah has actually did start shooting missiles into Israel. That is sort of given the Israelis the excuse to move into southern Lebanon with troops. I don't know. It seems from an Israeli point of view, it logically makes sense, but I wonder how it's being. But it's also done some horrible things. You've sort of displaced 1 million Lebanese, which is
it's 1 million per the times. Yes,
a tenth of the population, or even more. So it has both humanitarian consequences. But I wonder if I can't tell if he's biting off too much, or if this is actually, let's just get all this done, and Lebanon has to be part of the solution from their point of view.
That I cannot answer, but what I can tell you, what recently happened today, what Israel did hit 3 bridges in the Litani. They are trying to cut any road that Hezbollah can transport weapons. And at the same time, the campaign is not confined now to the south, as we all heard. It's moving to Beirut, to Raushi, Hazmiya, northern of Lebanon. So they are hitting many targets, including the displaced people. Among them, there are people from Hezbollah, which is creating another challenge for Hezbollah and Hezbollah community. So they are starting to face some kind of pushback from the people who used to embrace them. So there is a pressure. And as you pointed out, the pressure on the government is huge. And yesterday, the Hezbollah are threatening the Lebanese government and saying, after the war, we're gonna deal with traitors. It was a very hostile narrative. But I want to add something that everybody overlooks in Lebanon as part of the government. It's the army itself. The Lebanese army is the institution that everyone expects to hold the line. Let me just remind everybody, economically, the Lebanese army is not in a strong position. Soldiers are earning salaries that like couple of hundreds of dollars, but they are working overtime to stay alive. So it's between their survival and their service. This is not a strong army. They don't have the military equipment. And on top of that, in 1975, the army itself collapsed under the actual government around Muslim and Christian. Anyway, I'm not saying it's going to happen now. But back then, there was a big fracture between in the Lebanese army, between Muslim, which is the Durzi, Sunni, Shia, Alawite, and the Christian. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but anyway, this Lebanese army, with the economical stress that they are undergoing, and they are part of the society as well, and their families are being displaced, so it's not easy. And the displacement in Lebanon, Matt, I speak to my brother. He was displaced from his home. And you should hear the anger in his voice, in my sister's voice, in my family's voice. No, it's not our war. And they can barely survive the day. And the crazy part is during the day they go to work and they don't know when Israel is going to hit, or when one is IRGC, a person, or Hezbollah is walking beside them. Fear is everywhere. It's traumatizing. This is all what I can say.
I mean, but the Lebanese army has been weak for the last, 50 years, and so that's, and the Lebanese state has been weak for the last 50 years. It seems like that Israel may move in and hold parts of southern Lebanon, that this time they want to create a bigger buffer zone so it's harder to hit northern Israel with your Hezbollah. But to what degree can they, in fact, destroy Hezbollah, considering that it represents the largest, sect in Lebanese society? And it seems to me, they're losing popularity, but they're a lot more popular than Israel is, and that is the one institution that seems to unify Lebanese Shia.
You are absolutely right. Israeli forces are no longer operating from a distance. They are moving into proximity. They are pushing several kilometers inside, and they are trying to take the hills where you can oversee Israel. But I don't see that they're gonna do the occupation like they used to do in the last two occupations. The recent one is in 1982, because it proved that the society, like the Hezbollah society in southern Lebanon, there's Christians and there's the Muslim Shia. So people will go back definitely to their homes. They don't want to create another kind of resistance if they killed it now and they stay there to create another type of resistance. I think they learned from the past, and now with the AI and all the technology, they can do this war from the sky and through taking certain important points that they can secure their safety. But to your question, how far they can destroy Hezbollah, there's two parts of it. Military wise, I don't see them stopping before they finish Hezbollah military wise. Socially, it's going to take time because Hezbollah are embedded in schools, in everything, in the money infrastructure. It's going to take a lot of time, and it needs a strong government to help in that, because when you don't have the government supporting you, you will have, again, somebody like Iran coming and taking over.
But Lebanon, I mean, the Salam government and the new government, there was so much optimism about it, and yet they never had either the will or the means to stand up to Hezbollah. And if the Israelis don't do it, who's going to do it? It seems to me.
Okay, that's a very general point of view. Let me tell you, internal perspective, how it goes. Lebanon witnessed a lot of civil wars. Salam, I'm just giving the devil advocate in here and the analysis based on living all these wars myself. Salam does not want to trigger a civil war. And the only party that has weapon is Hezbollah. And he doesn't want to weaponize other parties in the field. So they are trying to pressure Hezbollah in a good way, counting on their nationalism, which I doubt they have it based on what they have done and how they dragged Lebanon into this war. This is what Salam did. And Salam already has some arguments with the Lebanese army head that telling him that you need to push harder. And the Lebanese army general pushed back, not because he wants to push back, it's just because they don't want to break or fracture the army, similar to what I told you what happened before. It's so challenging, that it's much more complicated than it looks. And yes, the Lebanese government will not be able to take the weapons of Hezbollah. They tried throughout the years, and every time they refused for a reason or another. So this is where Israel moved from containing the threat to eliminating the threat.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting too, like, that you see some voices in Lebanon before all this happened that we should negotiate with Israel, and I didn't hear the Israelis pick up on that or embrace that very much. I mean, at the time Israel was very open to, we'd love to normalize with Saudi Arabia. That was obviously the pre-October 7th mood, but with Lebanon, I don't know if you can say maybe the Israelis haven't tried hard enough to work with the central government, or haven't tried hard enough to make life better for the central government.
There was a negotiation that started before the war on Iran, and it was baby steps, but it was something Lebanon was never engaged in a conversation with Israel. That was a good start. But when the war started with Iran, the president himself asked for a direct negotiation with Israel. This is where Israel did not pick up on that.
Yeah.
Is it because they don't trust the government? They're going to eliminate Hezbollah or take away the weapons from them? Or they want to eliminate the threats themselves, then go into negotiation? That's the question.
There are these three H proxies: the Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. And the Houthis are the dog that hasn't barked here. Um, and why is that? Andres, what do you think?
I think that they've been going through their own difficulties, and there's a changing environment in Yemen. I wouldn't count them out yet. I think they're kind of lying in wait to see what happens. I I always find it interesting that when they send missiles north, that it's crossing Saudi Arabian territory, and no matter what the Houthis do, it's got to cross somebody's territory. I've always been interested in how that is going to play out. In the end, they're going to upset more people, but I think they're just lying in wait.
Well, there we go. I mean, so get the proxies. The Hezbollah's in trouble. Houthis are quiet. Hamas has obviously gone through a 2.5 year shellacking. So the main action really is back in the Persian Gulf, and we have, the Marine Expeditionary Force is moving toward the region. There's some suggestions that they may be used to take Karg Island, and as the attacks on the gas fields also see that the U.S. and Israel seem to be willing to use the energy pressure point against whatever is left of the regime. And this is part of the conversation here. No boots on the ground. This feels like Iraq, quagmire, mission creep. Use your cliche. But I wonder in the region, I'm surprised that after the initial shock, the Gulf states, the Emiratis are sounding very confident about being able to defend themselves, but also saying, hey, we're still at this great crossroads for people, goods, and money. Don't give up on us. The Saudis are saying publicly even, like, finish the job. So I find myself looking on and thinking, wow, how bizarre. Actually, it seems like the Arab states are more cheering on, escalation, or at least finishing this in a way that will depose the regime, whereas the Europeans, the Japanese, and the Chinese, the probably most Democrats and half the Republican Party want this thing to end tomorrow, no matter what.
I think a lot of this depends on what it is one cares about. For Israel, for the U.S., there's the nuclear threat. I think for a lot of people, there's a nuclear threat. I think for people who aren't worried about the nuclear threat, but they don't exactly like having proxies in their midst, stirring up trouble, I think they have a different motivation. They're probably not worried about nuclear weapons in some of the places that the proxies operate, but obviously there's somebody stirring up trouble. And then you have the people in Iran. And I think that's one of the key questions. It kind of crops up every couple of days is, in theory, that's how this began, right? I mean, there were demonstrations and massacres and so on. The US president has said a few times, wait for us and so on. I think, that's the crux of all of this is we talk about how do you declare victory? What constitutes victory? You have so many things in one big sort of melting pot, right? You have remove the nuclear threat. You have no longer have, if the Islamic Republic is gone, it's not clear how these proxies are going to survive. Just like when the Soviet Union disappeared, Cuba it started its path into being in trouble without its sponsor. And then you have the people of Iran, who I think a lot of people worry are going to be caught up in the mix if the world, if the world's okay with, well, no nuclear program, they're no longer funding the proxies and arming them. We can live with a kind of not nice, authoritarian regime as long as it doesn't cause international trouble at the expense of the Iranian people. That, I think, is the fear.
Yeah, but I think actually, Leila, for you, since you have a much better your finger on this pulse much more than we do, like, what is the mood in the Arab world about this war right now? We used to hear about the Arab Street, obviously hated what was going on in Gaza. Here, there's actually more ambivalence, and it's a very different kind of ambivalence than in the U.S., where you have the U.S., the split is between whatever's left of the neoconservatives in the Republican Party. Democrats hate it because Trump is doing it, and are worried that it wasn't explained properly, wasn't planned properly. People support Trump. So it's a kind of like isolationism versus interventionism argument. Whereas in the Arab world, my reading of it is that there's long-standing tension between Persians and Arabs. Iran doesn't have that many friends in the Arab world. The way that Iran has responded to this by sending, missiles and drones every which way has also really solidified people. So I sense that in week 3, there is less worries than in week 1. Oh, is the Bahraini street going to kind of come and rise up? Or is there going to be a kind of renewed Islamist threat emerging from the shadows in Saudi or even in the Emirates and in other parts of the region? There seem to be there's more pro-war in the Middle East than they are in the US. Fair or not fair?
In the Gulf, you have in the streets a different conversation. They want to get rid of Iran, but now they are seeing the liability in a way of the American bases inside their countries, because the American bases, they were supposed to be protecting them, now are being attacked. So they want to get rid of Iran. The sooner the better, just be done with it. And while on the other side, the Levant, where Iran has proxies, specifically in Lebanon, Iran does not have to do anything. It has Hezbollah doing their war. But at the end, the people inside Lebanon and let's say Syria and Jordan and everywhere, they want to be done with Iran and its proxies. So it's different than Gaza.
It makes you wonder, like, back to the kind of the different elements of why people want the regime destroyed and defeated. What if the nuclear issue went off the table? What if literally any capacity to build nuclear weapons were gone? Would that be enough to make everybody, the main parties in this just go, well, okay, no nuclear program?
Victory more convincingly than he could have otherwise. But I don't think the Israelis would be satisfied, and it doesn't seem like actually the region would be satisfied.
Yep.
It's not about the nuclear. The nuclear there were negotiations before.
Yep.
We are beyond that now.
It is beyond that. I think on that note, I guess we can park this and take a wait and see and keep reading the headlines. Let's
do that. Good to see you all.
I think next time we should talk about what's next in Iran.
I mean, my closing question would have been that, or like, is the war now more likely or less likely as of this week to end sooner or later, or something like that? I think.
Okay.
We can do like the bulletin of the atomic scientists, where they have the clock and how close it is to midnight. We can have a kind of endometer to see how close do we think.
Who's winning the war this week as opposed to last week?
Yes.
I would say last week it was a draw with a slight edge to the Iranians because of what was going on in the energy markets and the feeling that this was out of control. I actually would say that it looks much more in the US and Israeli favor this week, because they are still successful at decapitating the regime, and that Iran seems more desperate than fighting a war by design.
100%, I agree. I mean, there are people who would say that Iran is winning because it's simply because the regime is surviving. But I think it took a very sharp downward turn with the series of high-profile assassinations.
Surviving how? The question, surviving is a big word. How you are surviving.
Exactly. And they're going to have to resolve this issue of where is Mujtaba sooner rather than later. As I noted in the News MBN briefing this week, there's normally a Nowruz New Year greeting. Every year there's been one from the Supreme Leader. It's a thing. I mean, it is just a standard expected thing that it's hard to imagine right now if we haven't even heard his voice, that he's suddenly going to be there delivering a ringing speech. So that's definitely something to stay tuned for.
Okay, Anders, how do you say Happy New Year in Persian?
Sal Naw Mubarak. Nowruz Mubarak.
On that note, see you soon.